Once again, we go across to Johannesburg to look at the closing ceremony of the G20.
Summit formally closes this summit and now moves on to the next president of the G20, which is the United States, where we shall see each other again next year. The summit is therefore closed. I now say that this gavel of this G20 summit formally closes this summit and now moves on to the next president of the G20, which is the United States, where we shall see each other again next year. The summit is therefore closed. I now say that this gavel of this G20 summit formally closes this summit and now moves on to the next president of the G20, which is the United States, where we shall see each other again next year. The summit is therefore closed.
The momentous part of the G20 Johannesburg edition, a conclusion. President of South Africa, the host nation, announcing the conclusion of the 20th G20, also saying that the gavel now, the presidency, goes to the next leader, to the United States. As we've been talking about, interestingly, United States was not represented on the high table here. President Donald Trump of the US decided to boycott and miss this edition of the G20. We're here in the visuals, 2 days of deliberation, significant outcomes by the leaders of the G20 nations, comes to a close as President Cyril Ramaphosa, leader of the host nation.
I now say that this gavel of this G20 summit formally closes this summit and now moves on to the next president of the G20, which is the United States, where we shall see each other again next year. The summit is therefore closed.
South Africa G20 President, President Cyril Ramaphosa, announcing the conclusion of the G20 summit. Those visuals came in just a short while ago. Mr. Joshi, before we return to the point that you were making about the critical minerals, just to reflect on what we just heard from President Ramaphosa, easier said than done when he says we'll all meet next year in the United States.
Yes, it was a momentous event that you showed a clip of. And what came out to me in that moment was the very warm solidarity between Brazil and South Africa. The way President Lula hugged President Ramaphosa. You know, this kind of camaraderie, this kind of solidarity that exists in the global South, particularly between the member states of IBSA, BRICS, and in the G20 grouping, is a very significant indication of humanity's solidarity to continue on a path of sustainable development, of equitable development, of solidarity. And all these are now under serious challenge from American president. And it was a great hope that he expressed that we'll meet in America. I'm sure President Trump will host the meeting next year, but God knows how it will proceed and what will be the agenda that President Trump will propose. That remains to be seen.
Ambassador Bhatia, we've reflected on this earlier, but once again, do you think the real test of the Global South in many ways begins now. 4 G20s have taken place under the leadership of Global South nations. And now, when the US takes over, we'll have to see how this solidarity plays out in the year ahead.
I think you are right, and so is Ravi. This is not the time for confrontation. This is the time for real backdoor diplomacy. I think the US president has shown that he does change his mind. And therefore, I think it is now incumbent on G20 to make approaches in such a manner that they are able to bring the US into the fold, into its own family. I think that will be in the collective interest of the world. There's no point in confrontation here. We have to remember that this declaration does not have the approval or endorsement of the US. It does not have the approval or endorsement of Argentina. So 2 countries are out. Earlier, one panelist had spoken about the absence of President Xi Jinping. And I wanted to actually mention to Professor Harsh Pant that, media tends to all the time emphasize that point. I think the Chinese leader is always there. Chinese premier is there in Johannesburg. And therefore, China's absence does not matter. And if there is a kind of some friendly gesture by one president to the other president, that does not really mean that China is losing interest in G20. China is fully committed to G20. So moving from here, I think, as I mentioned, on the logistics side, and now that the gavel has been put on the table, Chief of Protocol may collect it, hand it over to the Chargé d'Affaires of the US, and it will be for the US diplomat to find its way to make sure that it reaches White House. So that gets taken care of. Let us look for what would be now the initial formal announcement by the US government on the outcome of Johannesburg summit. We are receiving reports that this may not be terribly complimentary. So we will have to see what it means. Luckily, the good thing also on the positive side is staying optimistic. US government has already announced that they will accept the presidency and they will host the next summit in December 2026 at Miami. So that is also a very positive thing. Thirdly, I think you very rightly pointed out that sentence that President Ramaphosa mentioned, Washington or the US, which is where we all will meet for the next summit. We very much hope that that would come through and there would be no fissure or, withdrawals from G20. I'm fairly confident that that phase will be taken care of. And thereafter, as I mentioned earlier, I feel the country that's going to play a very, very important role is going to be the UK, the chair after the US. You are noticing that the UK is trying to be everywhere, in the European theater, in the Indo-Pacific, in Africa, and also it remains, it still enjoys a special relationship with the US. So I think British diplomacy also will be counted upon to play a role to bring G20 and US closer together so that the collective interests of humanity are preserved. Let us hope that that is how it would be, because this is the day when the summit is ending after 1 year of hard work by South Africans and Africans in general. I think it is important as friend of South Africa for us to stay optimistic on this one.
Ambassador Bhatia, with your rich experience in international diplomacy, I don't want to let go of an opportunity to also ask you, how special are these moments? With the conclusion, we see in a very informal way all the leaders get up, they hug each other. How often do 100 or more odd leaders from countries across the world gather in a single hall, deliberating on the future of the world? And when such a moment concludes, what does it mean for that interpersonal relationship and the importance of that?
It's a very thoughtful question, and I would say that these are very special moments for everyone, but especially for the host country. I think, South Africa was preparing for this presidency for a long time. They had helped India in a big way. They helped Brazil in a big way. And as a result, they received the utmost cooperation from the previous two presidencies. But South Africa was facing a very special problem. They have serious economic difficulties. They even had, when the presidency began, serious power shortage. And, there is also other problems. So the idea was, first of all, to stabilize one's own domestic governance and then go all out to prepare for this very big event. Of course, South Africa has had massive experience of holding big international conferences, so that was really not a problem. And then on top of that, this unexpected problem with the US arose, and all these barbs and criticism that arrived, and at the end saying the president will send vice president, but then vice president will also not come, no official would attend. This was quite a setback. In contrast, just imagine when we hosted, President Biden was early to arrive. There was a bilateral between him and Prime Minister Modi, and things really ran smoothly, and we even developed some very important initiatives. So very important for the host. I think they would feel a sense of relief, they would feel a sense of achievement, and they would also feel that, clearly the spotlight of the world and they as the leader of Africa is established. With regard to the other people, other leaders, I think each of them makes full use of those 3 days. I mean, they travel long distances. Look at Brazil, look at South Korea, look at France or India for that matter. I mean, they have to travel 8 to 12 hours or more, even though it's a special plane. It's a hard work. And then the moment you arrive in Johannesburg, it's a non-stop work. Let me tell you, I mean, on the basis of what I've seen from close quarters, there is not a moment of rest, relaxation, shopping, or entertainment. It is work, work all the way. So I feel very proud and happy of the fact that the country where I served, South Africa, has done so well. I would like to send or transmit my warm congratulations to all my South African friends. And I'm very sure that the meeting between Prime Minister Modi and President Ramaphosa would have further deepened the bonds that bind the two countries together.
Right, Ambassador Bharti. And in fact, those of us who were engaged in some capacity, whether covering the G20 in India in 2023, know that the engagements go on throughout the year. Every month, every week, there would be some engagement in some part of the country. Mr. Ravi Joshi, your thoughts, this very momentous occasion of the conclusion of the G20. Your thoughts on what South Africa's presidency has been able to achieve despite very, very unique and difficult circumstances?
The first and foremost thing is that they have managed to issue a joint statement. That's a very important point. That there was some apprehension that because of U.S. boycott, U.S. not agreeing to the resolution or objecting to certain phraseology, there could be some difficulty in issuing a joint statement or a final summit communique, but they managed to issue it well before the conclusion of the event. And that's one big achievement. And then what I find is that India has played a very critical role in this summit. Prime Minister Modi's contribution has been very significant, and his the 6-point plan, which he has suggested on global traditional knowledge repository, G20 Africa skill multiplier initiative, a global healthcare response team, and a joint effort to counter drugs and terror menace, and critical minerals circularity, open satellite data and satellite data partnership. In all these things, actually address some of the most important concerns of today's global issues. It matters to all the countries. And here, what has been emphasized is the integral humanism. That is the core, that is the critical word that I'm used. Integral humanism, which reflects India's civilizational values, is what has to be emphasized in this partnership. And before this, South Africa had already put forward its own 3-point goals of sustainable, equitable, and inclusive development as the motto for this summit. And I'm sure they have been able to achieve to large extent in the agreements that the countries have come together in shaping the joint communique at the end of the summit. So I think it's a very important summit. And let's see going forward. As you rightly said, there are issues, there are questions about funding, about equitable distribution of responsibilities in handling the crisis, debt relief for Africa. This is a major point for Africa. So these issues remain, and they cannot be papered over. They cannot be glossed over. So, but the very fact that so many countries, so many heads of state come together and make a joint declaration is a sign of positive strength in today's fragmented and chaotic world, which are unable to face or unable to tackle some very serious global challenges.
Ambassador Bhatia, for our viewers, especially for the young people who are watching this broadcast, who are watching the proceedings of the G20, who are looking at the manner in which leaders from across the world are articulating how the road ahead, the future ahead is going to be. Just to understand the technicalities, there's a 30-page long declaration, leaders' declaration of G20. Lots of ideas, many perhaps will take years, even perhaps maybe decades to achieve and realize, if they are realized. What is the kind of mandate does the G20 have? The ideas that have been discussed, articulated, promised, what kind of mandate does G20 have to take them forward? What kind of work happens after the G20 concludes and we look at what is going to be achieved in the days ahead?
Very creative question. I think it compels some introspection and some reflection. And certainly I would like to share my initial assessment on this. I have been studying these statements, declarations for the past several years. First of all, in the past 4 years, that is ever since Indonesia became the president and then followed by India, Brazil, and now South Africa, this is the longest declaration. It has something like 121 paragraphs, whereas the last one, which was the longest, had about 85 paragraphs. So clearly, is it that more ideas have gone in, or there is more wordage, or there are so much more, elaboration that is required? But it does worry me as a former diplomat, because the longer the document is, the more difficult it is to implement. So we have to keep that in mind. The second point is really about the fundamental nature of G20. This forum, is it a forum that takes decisions and then it tries to implement them? Or is it a forum only to discuss and align the thinking of these countries, and then it is for them to do two things. One, to take the decisions back to their countries and incorporate them in their own national policy making. And secondly, to instruct their ambassadors to the UN, World Bank, IMF, and the rest of them to incorporate them and influence the decisions taken by these other bodies. Now, as far as I know, the mechanisms are very few within the document, within the declarations. And certainly there is no machinery. Because, for example, today we are sitting on 23rd November. In 7 days, South African presidency will be over. And then the entire responsibility and burden passes to the next. There is no secretariat of G20, but this is also, it is a strength. It is an informal body where leaders can talk and develop alignment and then decide how to proceed forward. It's not a treaty organization. So it is indeed true that while the document seems to suggest that
Ambassador Bhatia, I'll pause you for a moment. We're again going across to Johannesburg, South Africa, another important bilateral engagement of Prime Minister Modi, Prime Minister of India meeting Prime Minister of Canada, Prime Minister Narendra Modi in a bilateral engagement. These visuals came in just a short while ago. Earlier, India, Australia and Canada agreed to enter into a new trilateral technology innovation partnership, and here an important bilateral meet on the sidelines of the G20. The G20 concluded just moments ago. These are visuals coming in from Johannesburg, South Africa. Prime Minister in talks with the leader of Canada, Mike Carney, beg your pardon, Prime Minister of Canada, meeting Prime Minister Narendra Modi on the sidelines of the G20 summit. There have been a number of bilateral engagements that Prime Minister Modi participated in, multilateral engagements as well. Earlier in the day, Prime Minister met the new Prime Minister of Japan, Sanai Takaichi, and here in the visuals, Prime Minister Narendra Modi meeting Prime Minister of Canada, Mark Carney. Significant ties between India and Canada. Canada is also home to one of the largest Indian diaspora. And here are the two leaders meeting on the sidelines of the G20 in Johannesburg. Those visuals just came in a short while ago. Leaders of around 100 countries have gathered in Johannesburg, South Africa. They participated in the two-day Leaders Summit, G20 Leaders Summit, which just concluded a short while ago, where the host nation, South Africa, President Cyril Ramaphosa announced the closing and conclusion of the G20 Leaders Summit. And these 2 days also gave important opportunities to leaders to engage with one another. In the visuals, Prime Minister Narendra Modi meeting Mark Carney, Prime Minister of Canada. Ambassador Rajiv Bhatia, quick thoughts if you can have, because you've been emphasizing the significance of these pull-aside bilateral engagements. Here, Prime Minister Modi met Prime Minister Mark Carney of Canada.
Thank you very much. I also had the honor to serve in Canada, so I can say that this definitely is another important bilateral meeting. In fact, the evolution of India-Canada relations today can be tracked from the meeting of these two leaders in G7 just a few months back to now at G20. And between these two meetings, a lot has changed, a lot has happened. Because, you know, when it comes to bilateral matters, it is very easy for the leaders to reach certain common understandings and start implementing them. So this is what happened when the G7 summit took place. And now, obviously, this was very much an attempt to review the progress made. And I think the next step is bound to be a prime ministerial visit from one way or the other to the other country, because foreign ministers have been doing a lot of homework, a lot of solid work to take the relationship forward. And I think this formation of the trilateral with Australia further confirms the view that India and Canada have now taken a very positive turn to build and deepen their relationship further. And yes, it would be a good news for the large Indian diaspora in Canada. You know, they have, a lot of them have been there for 2 or 3 or more generations. They have been contributing very well to the development of Canada, and in many ways to the development of Canada-India relations. They were definitely very concerned when in the earlier period, for almost 2 years, India-Canada relations hit a nadir under the leadership of the previous Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. But I think that the new leader has fully understood and appreciated the growing importance of India as a global actor and the complementarity of needs and concerns of India and Canada. So I'm very happy that just as the meeting probably is finishing, the conference is finishing,
yes.
even this bilateral is taking place.
Right. Mr. Ravi Joshi, given the stature that India has achieved today, the relations that it has shaped with countries around the world, how do you see this unique opportunity to be able to engage in these poolside and bilateral meetings? Just Prime Minister Modi had a meeting with the Canadian leader. Also, this trilateral grouping that has come up now, India, Australia, Canada, on technology and innovation partnership. Your thoughts, sir?
Yes, that's a very important development which took place yesterday. The India, Australia, Canada meeting on an agreement on AI, on sharing of AI data and this digital partnership. That's a new development. And you must remember that this partnership already exists in another fora called the Quad. Actually in the Quad, it's India, Australia, Japan, and US. Now here there's a new triangle forming: India, Australia, Canada. So these summits are very useful for this kind of a new emerging relationship, new emerging multilateral. So we do not know in which direction the synergy takes. And these puller sides, as you rightly say, are equally important in addition to the main summit itself. So these meetings are very critical, and they actually push the nations towards more concrete progress in areas which they had not earlier thought of. So that's a very important development. And as Ambassador Bhatia said, these are meetings where there is a mechanism for implementing the agreement. Unlike the agreements which are passed by the G20, where there's no secretariat, where there's no mechanism to implement it, those become aspirational. Whereas these pull-aside meetings or bilateral meetings have a much more concrete and way of moving forward the relationship.
Right. Mr. Joshi, also, this new trilateral on technology and innovation partnership reminds me of the point that you were making around the critical minerals framework and the kind of role that India can envisage in the new models that are being articulated. If you could complete that point, sir, because that again is going to be in focus in the years ahead with AI and emerging technologies in focus.
Yeah, what I was saying is about critical mineral circularity is a kind of I think what is envisaged in Prime Minister Modi's statement is that the global commons, there should be some kind of a repository. Okay, but it is that's very easily said, and it's very difficult to do it because the country that has the critical mineral would rather look for some buyer who will benefit it directly. So sharing that critical minerality with a vague concept called the global repository is not going to help that particular country in any way. So it is basically, ultimately, it will be taken by the mega corporations, which are in need of these critical minerals. So whether it is the manufacturer of iPhones, or whether it's a manufacturer of Tesla cars, or it is solar panels, they will come and grab it. And China and America are already in a race to control the critical minerals of almost every country in the world. And there you can't say that let's have a commonwealth. I don't see how a commonwealth can emerge. So we must remember that we are still in the capitalist mode of production where countries look for their own profits. And that profit is the driving force of all economic development today. And it is much more brutally asserted by America under President Trump. And he brooks no opposition to any kind of demand that America has on the board. And he will go ahead and capture it. So this is what, and America has these 4 trillionaires who will capture all the resources of the world. And only China can oppose it in a significant manner by trying to gather for itself whatever critical minerals are available in the world. So the other countries which do not have the wealth, or some countries may not even know what to do with these critical minerals, may not need this. So they will be left out. So the inequality will continue in technological terms. So that will be very difficult to bridge that digital divide or technological divide. So I don't see how that kind of a critical mineral repository can be created and how it's going to actually work in practice.
Right. Mr. Joshi, I'm looking at Prime Minister's 6 new initiatives that he proposed at the G20 Leaders Summit. And earlier, Ambassador Bharti also mentioned that a good way to look at the importance of these initiatives is to what extent have they been incorporated in the final declaration of the statement. So the number 4, which reads, as Prime Minister puts it, initiative on countering the drug terror nexus. And we look at the declaration very early on in the declaration. It clearly states that the grouping G20 condemns terrorism in all its forms and manifestations. In a year in India, India has faced the scourge of terrorism for a long time, but in a year when Operation Sindoor also happened, how significant is to see that India's concerns regarding terrorism has been recognized and given so much prominence in the declaration?
You're right. The declaration has given a fair amount of prominence to India's concern. Okay, both the drug and terror menace are accepted as global challenges. But now let me come back to reality. What is the present day reaction of the US to these two problems? So you mentioned Operation Sindoor. Now, that was we were countering a terror attack in Pahalgam. Now we have US, which is bending backwards to be good to General Asif Munir and to Pakistan, and is going out of its way to win over the friendship and warmth of Pakistani leadership. So how does that play in Delhi? And now let me talk about how US is tackling the drug problem in its neighborhood. Venezuela, American president is straight away sending boats to be bombed. He is even sending aircraft carriers in the waters on the Venezuela shores to bomb these drug cartels, which are sending drugs to their small boats. In fact, it is not even proved that they're carrying drugs, but they're being bombed. So if this is the completely unilateral way that America is going to behave with a country that is allegedly sending drugs to America. So how is this kind of a universal statement going to stop America? Or how is this going to be a regulatory mechanism on the world? So each country will deal with its own problem in the way it finds it best, whether it is drug or terror. So that is the bottom line, and that's what Trump is proving. So that's the reality today.
Right.
I have a point.
Yes, please.
I think we need to, earlier we were discussing as to what is the real importance of G20.
Yes.
Whether it takes decisions which need to be implemented, or whether it creates consensus among leaders based on which then they can influence their own national policy making and the multilateral institutions of decision making. I want to make a new point here, which is that G20 is not just a forum of the governments. It is a larger forum, and it has various organs for that purpose, which brings business and industry, think tanks, media, non-governmental sector, all other elements of society of these countries. And it is they who first meet, and they bring in their inputs at various levels. They are fed into the main G20 through the two tracks, the finance track and the Sherpa track. And then the whole inputs being digested and processed are eventually put up to the presidents and prime ministers, who then take a decision whether an element will go into the declaration or not. So the point I'm making is that this gives to G20 a massive moral, political, and popular support. And in fact, if I may be allowed, I would like to compliment you and Doordarshan for doing a program like this. For hours and hours you have devoted on G20 so that our viewers, particularly the young viewers, could understand the real importance. There was no G20 before 2008. And today G20 has become a kind of a global phenomenon. Those countries which are not members would love to, give anything to become a member. But those who are members, they are doing their best to involve everybody together because it is obviously a global forum discussing global issues. So I think on the one hand, it is an informal body. So we cannot judge it too harshly that you have said something in the declaration and next year, you have not implemented it. The world does not work like that. And that is the reason why other pathways are being found out, trilateral, minilateral, and the rest of it. But the important thing to note is that it is not just a governmental forum any longer. Almost it is a whole of the society approach which really lends extraordinary importance to these deliberations and to their outcome.
Right. That's an important point. Mr. Ravi Joshi, would you like to add to that, this whole idea of whole of society approach of the G20? Many would wonder where is the accountability if it's an informal organization? But the stakeholders are many and not just the leaders who perhaps had gathered in Johannesburg for 2 days. Your thoughts, sir?
No, as Ambassador Bhatia said, it is a moral force. What the G20 is trying to declare is a kind of an aspiration which the world should look to achieve. The goals are equitable, sustainable, inclusive development. These are unquestionable goals. I mean, every country would love to have, but we have to do this in the context of the real world that we are living in, and there is and if the most important country in the world, the United States, does not append its signature to a document like this, then it becomes very difficult for all other partners to implement this, or they have to implement it in the face of this opportunity. That is the problem. So now, probably the world is getting fragmented. There's no doubt about it. The world is getting economically fragmented, politically fragmented, and there are partnerships arising which are looking for not only their individual interests but collective interests being pursued in a moral path where you have to overcome very serious challenges and obstacles. So that is the reality we are facing, and let's see how this G20 faces the climate crisis, perhaps. That's one of the most important global challenges.
But that's also in the context, Mr. Joshi, when a COP30 outcome is in front of us, where once again the world is not sure what we want to do with fossil fuels.
Yeah. See, these are the challenges which any multilateral forum is unable to tackle. And when you discuss climate, we look at who are the most polluters in the world, and what are they contributing to lessen their pollution and to help the other countries by giving them carbon credit or funding for reducing their dependence upon fossil fuels. All these questions arise, and all these questions still remain unanswered. That is the real world, and but nevertheless, there is a moral force which keeps these leaders going, and they are doing this in order to assert that there is something higher than individual countries' interests, and that's what should be binding.
Ambassador Bhatia, the question that I had put to Mr. Joshi earlier on drug terror nexus, countering terrorism, something that has been highlighted in the final declaration of the G20. Now, for the past couple of hours, we've been talking about what India and other countries bring to the G20. Is it fair to ask the reverse question as well? What G20 does for India, for instance, what it does to the issues that India prioritizes. In that context, how would you look at the outcome of this gathering?
Yeah, I hope this is the last question for me. With your permission, I will probably need to go.
We'll take your comment and let you go. Yes, please.
I would very much like to answer this question.
Please,
what
sir.
does the G20 do for India? A very bright question. You know, you really compel us to think. I think G20 allows India, first of all, to help its partner countries, particularly those which are probably not doing as well as India is doing. This is done in multiple ways. This is done because G20 serves as a forum to expound India's philosophy, India's views, India's perspective. Even this doctrine of integral humanism that Prime Minister articulated yesterday, many in India may not have heard of it. But when you talk about it and you look around and you research and you find that this is integrating the individual, the society and the nature, then you begin to understand that India has some philosophy, some vision to share. And where else can you explain this? I mean, the speeches at the UN podium have become so routine, nobody listens to them quite often. So this is one aspect. The second aspect is, the ambition to be a leading power. You can see from the visuals, even if they are probably by, our cameras, the fact is that our leader blends so well, socializes so well with leaders from different continents. This is a matter of pride. I think we have to recognize that. And the third and the most important thing is that G20 enables us to keep in touch with the changing trends in the world. We don't have to depend any longer on telegrams from our ambassadors, though they are useful. But when our Prime Minister and Foreign Minister are spending 2 days talking to the Europeans, talking to the Latin Americans, talking to the Africans, talking to Asians, they are so well informed, whether it is about Ukraine or about Gaza or about Venezuela. I mean, we cannot even imagine sitting here in Delhi as to how well informed our leaders are. In fact, I read that when on day one, a CEO of Nespers called on our Prime Minister, soon after that, that gentleman gave a bite to the media saying that I was amazed as to how well informed Prime Minister Modi was about artificial intelligence, about emerging technologies. So this is something fundamentally significant. So in all, I would say G20 should be judged not just by its ability to immediately implement whatever is figuring in the declaration. It has to be seen from a larger lens. I think it has proved its worth to India. India has definitely contributed to its evolution. And we are hopeful that in the short to medium term, it should be able to navigate whatever turbulence it faces. And let us try to end on that optimistic note.
On that note, thank you very much, Ambassador Rajiv Bhatia, for joining us in this special broadcast. Always a pleasure listening to you, sir. Mr. Joshi, we'll continue our conversation. At one point that Ambassador Bhatia mentioned before leaving integral humanism, when Prime Minister talks about it in his intervention, in a forum which many would think is a place for hardcore economic, geopolitical negotiation. What place does a philosophical concept have, which is talking about individual, world, community and the planet altogether? How do you see the significance of it? How does it address the very key fissures facing the world today?
Integral humanism is a continuation of Prime Minister Modi's repeated aphorism, Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. basically he means that the world is one family. And humanism should be the guiding principle of all the policies of all the countries. That's what he is basically talking about. And the South African summit also had something similar in its motto, equitable, sustainable development. These were the goals. So, inclusive, sustainable goal is also part of achieving integral humanism. It is a continuation of our civilizational values that Prime Minister Modi has been putting forward in most of these global fora. There is nothing new about it, and it is in consonance with the ideas that the world leaders have gathered in Joburg to achieve a moral binding mandate upon the leaders for achieving a sustainable development, a sustainable, equitable development of these countries, particularly of the global south.
Right, and he sort of expands on that point, talks about global traditional knowledge repository. We've seen the manner in which in the past decade, especially in the leadership of Prime Minister Modi, Indian civilizational resources such as yoga, Ayurveda have been institutionalized, have been taken forward to new horizons. But he talks about all the countries coming together and make use of, preserve, promote their traditional knowledge. So in that sense, the civilizational values and connect also find a place when we talk about the future at the G20.
Yes, when we talk of global traditional knowledge repository, it does not mean only Indian traditional knowledge.
Yes.
Because China is also a country with a huge, long civilizational knowledge base, and there are so many African countries which have also their own systems of knowledge, systems of medicine and healthcare, etc. So this is uniquely Asian and African. Those countries which have a civilizational past, and these things are becoming lost because of the dependence of human race on modern technological means for either its economic woes or its philosophical, spiritual woes. So now more and more people are coming to depend upon things which are transitory and which are not permanent and going in the sense of going back to the past, which had huge traditional knowledge. And as we know, in India itself, we have now introduced courses under the NEP of teaching Indian knowledge system right from schools onward. So this is a continuation of that. And China also does it, and India does it, and so does Iran and others which have a civilizational path. So this immediately appeals. There's a sense of empathy in Africa, Asia, and the global south. Yeah.
And so, while you speak, we're also playing out visuals of Prime Minister's bilateral engagement that he had earlier with Cyril Ramaphosa, President of the host country, South Africa, and also other African nations. Perhaps this venue, first G20 in Africa, wouldn't have been possible if India, under its presidency in the year 2023, had not introduced the African Union as a permanent member of the G20. In that sense, how do you also see this particular G20 an extension of, if I may call, India-Africa solidarity, this commitment to Africa's empowerment and development really at every level, and here at the level, institutional level of the G20 that India has been pushing for?
Yeah, actually, even before India brought in African Union, the last Delhi summit of G20, India, under Prime Minister Modi, he started an African summit in Delhi quite some time back. I think it was around 2015 or 16. He had a major African summit in Delhi, which was India's reaching out to Africa. That time it was considered that India is now trying to replace or compete with China in getting a foothold in Africa. But it is not necessarily a competition for resources. It's a competition for gaining partners, gaining friendships, and Africa and Africans. I have served in Africa, and I know very well that Africans have a great amount of sympathy and friendship and affection for India. So, in fact, we are far more appreciated in African countries than China, for instance. Though I may sound rather undiplomatic in saying that, but it's the fact. We are greatly appreciated as countries which helps Africa without any hidden agenda, without any hidden motive, and that is the beneficial aspect of India.
And what defines it, sir? Would you say it's the civilizational ties? One often says the most important diaspora person in India has been Mahatma Gandhi, who'd gone to South Africa in his lifetime. So what really defines this close ties and engagement between India and Africa beyond politics and economics?
It is the presence of Indian diaspora. The Indian diaspora is so significant in so many countries in Africa, particularly in South Africa, in East Africa, where I have served. If you see the presence of Indians in Tanzania, Nairobi, Kenya, and Uganda, it is so significant that Indians are actually only 1 lakh Indians were there in Nairobi, Kenya, when I was there, but they control 30% of the wealth. They are so well out, and basically they are from 2 communities, Gujarat, Punjabis, and most of them were actually taken as workers in building the British railway line in East Africa, or in the tea plantations, to work tea plantations. So the Indian diaspora has a huge historical presence in Africa, and they're completely assimilated themselves. They know the language, they speak like the locals, they employ the locals, they provide employment, and they are the holders of key leverage in the political power and economic power in so many of these countries. So, they have not come under serious attack, excepting once in Uganda during Idi Amin's time. After that, no country has actually been hostile to Indian presence. And they all welcomed Indian presence, and they greatly appreciate India.
And so, from your experience again, if I may ask, there's a beautiful convergence as far as the value systems of the 2 civilizations are concerned. Quickly want to refer to this African philosophy of, I hope I'm pronouncing the name correct, it's Ubuntu, which means I am because we are. That's how the declaration starts, with President Ramaphosa quoting from the value system of Africa. Resonates with the idea of Vasudhaiv Kutumbakam that Prime Minister quoted while on his way to the G20. So this value system, the outlook, the way in which we look at the world outside, there is a significant convergence, at least in the value system.
You're right, absolutely right. The individual does not occupy the centrality of the universe in the African value system or in the Indian value system. It is the family or the village, which is a collective entity, which occupies the centrality of its philosophy. For instance, there's a famous book that Hillary Clinton has written about African system of education. It says it takes a village. It takes a village to educate a child. It is not merely a family or a school. The entire village takes part in the education of a child. Education is basically transmission of its knowledge, of its culture, of its historical heritage. And in that, the village plays an important role. So it is almost like India's importance on family, Gurukula, and this kind of a collective notion being the central identity of the society. That's almost equal in both Indian and African philosophical outlook.
On that note, Mr. Ravi Joshi, many thanks for joining us in this special broadcast and sharing your insights into the significance of India's engagement with the G20. Thank you. And we continue our conversation on Prime Minister Modi's visit to Johannesburg and the G20. Joining me now is Professor Sanjay Bharadwaj from School of International Studies, JNU. Good evening and warm welcome, Professor Bharadwaj. Good to have you with us. You must be closely watching the proceedings of the G20. First, let me get that opening remarks from you. What is the kind of roadmap that G20 Johannesburg edition lays down for the years ahead?
I think two very important aspects that Prime Minister Narendra Modi had always been emphasizing. One is, of course, that he is talking about a green and clean energy, basically in the context of climate change, where he had been always advocating about through the International Solar Alliance and the other initiatives that how we can address the global commons, and in this global commons particularly emphasizing about the climate change, and that the way Prime Minister Narendra Modi had further strengthened this voice in this G20 summit in Africa, that would definitely will definitely put the global South's voice, that how we can have a climate justice where the countries of North can also share more responsibility, because they have been the major source of environmental implications and climate change. So I think that Prime Minister Narendra Modi has emphasized about this very important aspect. The second, again, very important message had been given to the world community, and I think India and Africa and Latin American countries and all these where they are presenting major voice of the global South is the drug terror linkages, in fact, and that we have seen in South Asia, the way the Afghanistan and Pakistan, and the way we have been suffering about the terrorism in this part of the world. In the same manner in Latin America, where a lot of drug cartels and that lot of conflicts are taking place, and that is a threat to the humanity. And that's why Prime Minister Modi he emphasized about the integral humanism to explore that how you can advocate about the human-centric development. So I think these two very important aspects that Prime Minister Narendra Modi had highlighted and emphasized as being the a vocal voice of the global South that had been represented when India was hosting the G20 summit, and we had been instrumental to include the African Union into the G20. So I think this is a very again very important occasion to raise the voice of the global South through Prime Minister Narendra Modi. Then the third again is very important aspects about the hearing the voice of the people, in fact, the people's participation in decision making and policy making process. Being the largest democracy in the world, that India had always advocating about that democratic ethos, not only in within the country, but also in the international forums. While
Professor Bharadwaj, I'll stop you for a moment. We again go across to Johannesburg, South Africa. Prime Minister Narendra Modi in a bilateral engagement with Giorgia Meloni, Prime Minister of Italy. Number of key bilateral engagements Prime Minister Narendra Modi has had on the sidelines of the G20 summit that concluded a short while ago. These visuals came in a short while ago. The venue is Johannesburg. Prime Minister Narendra Modi in bilateral conversation with Prime Minister of Italy, Giorgia Meloni. Prime Minister Modi and Italian Prime Minister have met across multiple forums in the past. In fact, Prime Minister Meloni's first state visit to India after election was in March 2023. During her visit, India-Italy relations were elevated to the level of strategic partnership. And here, the two leaders have an occasion to once again meet and take forward the close ties between the nations. These visuals coming in from Johannesburg. Prime Minister Narendra Modi meeting Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni, leader of Italy. The leaders looking at the areas of key interest. One perhaps could be Italy-India joint strategic plan, that maps the road ahead from 2025 to 2029. Important occasion on the sidelines of the G20 Leaders Summit, a two-day Leaders Summit that concluded a short while ago. These visuals came in of Prime Minister Narendra Modi's bilateral meeting on the sidelines of the G20 with the Italian leader, Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni of Italy. And Professor Sanjay Bharadwaj from JNU continues to be with us. Professor Bharadwaj, before we talk about the key takeaways of the G20, want to reflect on these very important bilateral meetings that the Prime Minister has had during this visit, and the latest one with the leader of Italy, Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni. How do you see it?
Yeah, I think that one very important aspect that Prime Minister Narendra Modi has very good rapport with all the leaders, particularly the young minds that they have been representing. And when it comes to the leader, the Italian, then definitely, EU is very important, very significant trade partner for India. Not only trade, but other also like non-traditional security areas like the education, like medicine, like the other European countries in the context of defense agreements, and then it comes to the energy technology and all that. I think very important meeting with the Italian Prime Minister and Meloni, and I think this would further strengthen the Indian voice in the EU, where India has been considering the European Union very important for to strengthen the voice of the global South, where it is represented by the Prime Minister Narendra Modi. And particularly when I talk about the issue of development and climate change, then meeting with the Italian Prime Minister is very important, because they are also equally concerned about the increasing threats from the environment or the way the ozone layers are impacting by the environmental issues. So this is very important, very significant bilateral meeting between Prime Minister Narendra Modi and Meloni.
Right. On that note, Professor Sanjay Bharadwaj, thank you for joining us in this special broadcast and sharing your interest. And that also brings us to the close of this special coverage of Prime Minister's visit to South Africa to attend the G20 summit, host of important bilateral and multilateral engagements that Prime Minister had. News and updates continue after a short break. Namaskar.